The Denver Broncos just received a double dose of incredible news, a rare injury update that couldn't have come at a better time this late in the season. And let's not forget, Vance Joseph has pinpointed what's really been the Achilles heel of the Broncos' defense with a plan to address it as they gear up to face the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, let's dive into the details. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover all AFC West news here on this channel. With just 2 weeks left in the NFL season, injuries have hit teams hard across the league. Take the Detroit Lions, for instance. They've got 23 players on injured reserve, and their injury report reads like Santa's naughty list. But here's where things get interesting. Sean Payton has orchestrated the Broncos' season progression masterfully, and the results are showing. When you look at the Broncos' injury report, it's almost unbelievable. Every single player who isn't on IR, and yes, we've unfortunately lost Alex Singleton for the year, was able to practice. That's right, every eligible player suited up. This is phenomenal news, especially for a team peaking at the perfect moment. With the playoffs within reach, the timing couldn't be better. The Broncos have a real shot at clinching a postseason spot on Saturday. Depending on how things shake out, they could even be in a position to rest key players like Pat Surtain and Garrett Bowles on the season's final day. The playoff picture is still wide open, with possibilities for the 5th, 6th, or 7th seed on the table. What's remarkable is how the Week 14 bye has paid off. It gave the Broncos 4 full weeks to gear up for the stretch run before the playoffs begin, and now the team is getting healthy at just the right time. Among all the good news, one name stands out: Riley Moss. His return is huge for this defense. Moss has quickly proven himself to be one of the league's top corners, and pairing him with Pat Surtain creates a shutdown duo that can neutralize threats like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It's almost hard to believe the Broncos are this healthy this late in the season. The impact of Riley Moss's absence has been felt ever since he went down earlier in the season, particularly in that game against the Raiders. The defense has struggled at times, especially against mobile quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson, who made an immediate impact against them. Then there was that moment, an insult to injury, when they celebrated with the mile-high salute. It felt like a slap in the face, and understandably, fans were not happy. That frustration only grew as Jameis Winston and Justin Herbert carved up the Broncos' defense. It became clear that to fix the problem, the first step was identifying it. As the saying goes, a problem well stated is half solved. And to his credit, Vance Joseph did just that. Joseph highlighted the real issue plaguing the Broncos' defense in recent weeks. With the season reaching weeks 12, 13, 14, and beyond, there's been enough game tape for opposing teams to dissect and exploit weaknesses in their zone coverage. But here's the good news. Knowing the problem means they can now address it head-on. With Riley Moss back in action, the Broncos no longer have to lean on a vulnerable zone defense. That's a huge relief because, frankly, a quarterback like Joe Burrow would have had a field day picking it apart. Instead, the Broncos can return to what they do best: playing man-to-man coverage. Vance Joseph has plans to dial up aggressive cover-zero schemes, trusting Moss and Pat Surtain to hold their ground one-on-one. This approach will allow the defense to unleash pressure on Burrow, forcing him into quicker, tougher decisions. That's exactly the kind of news Broncos fans want to hear. Another key problem the Broncos have tackled this season was exposed during Bo Nix's struggles in the infamous Jets monsoon game. The conditions were brutal. The ball was so soaked and heavy, it was compared to throwing a shot put. The Broncos simply weren't prepared for the wet weather that stemmed from a hurricane impacting the region. The equipment team didn't have rain-ready footballs on hand, and the lack of preparation showed. But that's not the case anymore. This week, the team has been practicing with waterlogged footballs, dunking them in tubs to simulate those challenging conditions. Bo Nix has adjusted and is now far more comfortable throwing under those circumstances. By addressing these two major issues, defensive vulnerabilities and preparation for adverse weather, the Broncos are setting themselves up for success. When it comes to shutting down elite receivers, Pat Surtain's recent performance speaks volumes. Even the most skeptical NFL fans and analysts, those who might not give the Broncos much credit, have to acknowledge that Surtain is putting up Defensive Player of the Year caliber numbers. His ability to lock down top-tier receivers has been a game-changer for this defense. With interceptions and consistent shutdown coverage, Surtain has earned respect across the league. Pat Surtain continues to dominate at an elite level, and here's a stat that truly puts his performance into perspective. Opposing quarterbacks have a lower QBR when throwing at him than if they simply spiked the ball into the ground. Think about that for a moment. Pat Surtain's ability to force turnovers and incompletions makes targeting him more detrimental than giving up a down. It's wild. Joe Burrow might want to take note, but hey, I dare him to challenge Surtain and see what happens. We all remember what happened the last time they faced off. Surtain has consistently locked down the league's best receivers. Against Seattle, he held DK Metcalf to just 37 yards, even while dealing with some questionable offensive pass interference calls. He neutralized George Pickens, who just had a monster game against Kansas City. And let's not forget Mike Evans. Surtain shut him down too. even as Evans is on his way to yet another 1,000-yard season. Now, with Riley Moss back on the field, Surtain has even more support in the secondary. This duo is going to make life miserable for opposing offenses. It's exciting to see, and it's absolutely phenomenal news for the Broncos. Another narrative making the rounds is that the Bengals are on a hot streak, with some even saying they could make a Super Bowl run. But here's the thing. The Bengals haven't beaten a single good offensive team with a starting quarterback. Their wins include names like Daniel Jones, Andy Dalton, Gardner Minshew, Cooper Rush, Will Levis, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, none of whom are currently starting. That's where Bo Nix comes in. By most advanced metrics, Nix is playing at a top 15 level this season. He's leaps and bounds better than the quarterbacks the Bengals have faced, and will present a challenge they haven't yet encountered. This Bengals defense is struggling, and Nix is set to be the best quarterback they've faced all season. That's a big advantage for Denver. Now let's touch on an advanced analytic that stood out to me: the number of sacks a quarterback has taken. Surprisingly, the leader in this category is Caleb Williams, who's in arguably the best situation a rookie quarterback has ever been placed in. He's been sacked an astonishing 60 times, which is just unbelievable. Sean Payton has been clear. Nothing frustrates him more than a quarterback who takes unnecessary sacks. According to him, a sack tanks a team's chances of scoring on a drive. That's why this matchup against Joe Burrow is so intriguing. Burrow, who's in the top 10 for most sacks taken this season, is about to face a Broncos defense firing on all cylinders. With Riley Moss and Pat Surtain locking down Cincinnati's receivers, Burrow won't have many open targets. Add to that an intense pass rush that now includes Drew Sanders back in the rotation. Jonathan Cooper is on the verge of reaching double-digit sacks for the season. Nick Bonitto is playing some of the best football of his career. And Zach Allen continues to dominate in the middle. The defensive line has been bolstered by solid contributions from Malcolm Roach and DJ Jones, who are both playing exceptionally well. This unit is set to make Burrow's day a nightmare. Now I wonder whether Sean Payton will commit to the running game. Last week against the Chargers, the Broncos built an 11-point lead in the first half, partly thanks to a strong showing on the ground. Defense complemented that effort by forcing turnovers and limiting scoring. Despite this, Payton moved away from the run in the second half, leading to questions about his strategy. The Bengals' run defense has struggled at times this year, with issues in tackling and run fits, so the opportunity is there. But will Payton stay disciplined if the running game faces early struggles? Or will he revert to leaning on Bo Nix and the quick passing game, which has served as a substitute for the ground attack this season? Now, looking at the bigger picture, this game feels like the pivotal moment Sean Payton has been preparing for. Remember, he intentionally scheduled that short week against the Chargers earlier in the season to give the Broncos an extended window to focus over the Christmas break. And now, that preparation is paying off. If the Broncos win this game, they lock in at least the 7th seed in the playoffs. Depending on other results, they could climb as high as the 5th seed. The scenarios are wild but exciting. If Denver wins out and the Chargers lose just one of their remaining games, while the Bengals beat the Steelers next week, a very realistic scenario considering how Pittsburgh has struggled recently, the Broncos could find themselves heading to Houston for the first round of the playoffs. And who wouldn't want that matchup? There's also a path to the 6th seed if certain dominoes fall, or the 7th seed even if Denver drops its next 2 games. But here's the thing. Bo Nix has never lost 3 games in a row in his entire career. With the stakes this high, it's hard to see him letting that streak break now. Before we wrap up, what are your thoughts? Do you think the Broncos can carry this momentum into the playoffs? Will the return of Riley Moss and the dominance of Pat Surtain be enough to shut down Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense? Drop your score predictions in the comments. Let me know how you think this plays out. For me, I see the Broncos pulling off a 30-24 win and punching their ticket to the postseason. And one more thing, where do you see the Broncos landing in the playoff picture? Are we talking 5th seed, 6th seed, or hanging on to the 7th? Let's hear your takes below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on AFC West news and analysis.